and once she made one of Firian's wings disappear in mid-flight, causing him to fall. Luna skipped away, utterly unaware of what she had done. Zan tried encasing Luna in a protective bubble, telling her that it was a fun game they were playing, just to keep all the surging power contained. She cast bubbles around Firian, and bubbles around the goats, and bubbles around each chicken, and a very large bubble around the house, lest she accidentally blow their home to burst into flames, to allow their home to burst into flames. And the bubbles held. They were strongly magic after all, until they didn't. "Make more, Grandmama!" Luna cried, running in circles on the stones, each of her footprints erupting in green plants and lurid flowers. "More bubbles!" Zan had never been so enchanted in her life. "Take Firian to the South Crater," Zan told Glurk after a week of back-breaking labor and little sleep. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her skin was as pale as paper. Glurk shook his massive head. "I can't leave you like this, Zan," he said, as Luna made a cricket grow to the size of a goat. She gave it a lump of sugar that had appeared in her hand and climbed aboard its back for a ride. Glurk shook his head. "How could I possibly?" "I need to keep the both of you safe," Zan said. The swamp monster shrugged. "Magic has nothing on me," he said. "I've been around for far longer than it has." Zan wrinkled her brow. "Perhaps, but I don't know. She has so much, and she has no idea what she's doing." Her bones felt thin and brittle, and her breath rattled in her chest. She did her best to hide this from Glurk. Zan followed Luna from place to place, undoing spell after spell. The wings were removed from the goats, the eggs were untransformed from muffins, the treehouse stopped floating. Luna was both amazed and delighted. She spent her days laughing and sighing and pointing with wonder. She danced about, and where she danced, fountains erupted from the ground. Meanwhile, Zan grew weaker and weaker. Finally, Glurk couldn't stand it anymore. Leaving Firian at the crater's edge, he galloped down to his beloved swamp. After a quick dip in the murky waters, he made his way towards Luna, who was standing by herself in the yard. "Glurk," she called, "I'm so happy to see you. You're as cute as a bunny." And just like that, Glurk was a bunny, a fluffy, white, pink-eyed bunny with a puff for a tail. He had long, white lashes and fluted ears, and his nose quivered in the center of his face. Instantly, Luna began to cry. Zan came running out of the house and tried to make out what the sobbing girl had told her. By the time she began to look for Glurk, he was gone. He had hopped away, having no idea who he was or what he was. He had been enrabbited. It took hours to find him. Zan set the girl down. Luna stared at her. "Grandmama, you look different." And it was true. Her hands were gnarled and spotted. Her skin hung on her arms. She could feel her face folding over itself and growing older by the moment. And in that moment, sitting in the sun with Luna and the rabbit that once was Glurk shivering between them, Zan could feel it, the magic in her bending toward Luna, just as the moonlight had bent toward the girl when she was still a baby. And as the magic flowed from Zan to Luna, the old woman grew older and older and older. "Luna," Zan said, stroking the ears of the bunny, "do you know who this is?" "It's Glurk," Luna said, pulling the rabbit onto her lap and cuddling it affectionately. Zan nodded. "How do you know it is Glurk?" Luna shrugged. "I saw Glurk, and then he was a bunny." "Ah," Zan said, "why do you think he became a bunny?" Luna smiled. "Because bunnies are wonderful, and he wanted to make me happy. Clever Glurk." Zan paused. "But how, Luna? How did he become a bunny?" She held her breath. The day was warm, and the air was wet and sweet. The only sounds were the gentle gurgling of the swamp. The birds in the forest quieted down, as if to listen. Luna frowned. "I don't know, he just did." Zan folded her knotty hands together and pressed them to her mouth. "I see," she said. She focused on the magic stores deep within her body and noticed sadly how depleted they were. She could fill them up, of course, with both starlight and moonlight, and any other magic that she could find lying around, but something told her it would only be a temporary solution. She looked at Luna and pressed her lips to the child's forehead. "Sleep, my darling. Your grandmama needs to learn some things. Sleep, 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 sleep." And the girl slept. Zan nearly collapsed from the effort of it. But there wasn't time for that. She turned her attention to Glurk, analyzing the structure of the spell that had enrabbited him, undoing it bit by bit. "Why do I want a carrot?" Glurk asked. The witch explained the situation. Glurk was not amused. "Don't even start with me," Zan snapped. "There's nothing to say," Glurk said. "We both love her. She is family. But what now?" Zan pulled herself to her feet, her joints creaking and cracking like rusty gears. I hate to do this, but it's for all our sakes. She is a danger to herself. She is a danger to all of us. She has no idea what she's doing, and I don't know how to teach her. Not now. Not when she's so young and impulsive and Luna-ish. Zan stood, rolled her shoulders, and braced herself. She made a bubble and hardened the bubble into a cocoon around the girl, adding bright threads winding around and around. She can't breathe, Clerk said, suddenly alarmed. She doesn't need to, Zan said. She is in stasis, and the cocoon holds her magic inside. She closed her eyes. Zosimos used to do this. To me, when I was a child, probably for the same reason. Glurk's face clouded over. He sat heavily on the ground, curling his thick tail around him like a cushion. I remember, all at once. He shook his head. Why had I forgotten? Zan pushed her wrinkled lips to one side. Sorrow is dangerous, or at least it was. I can't remember why now. I think we both just became accustomed to not remembering things. We just let things get foggy. Glurk had guessed it was something more than that, but he let the matter drop. Firion will be coming down after a bit, I expect, Zan said. He can't stand being alone for too long. I don't think it matters, but don't let him touch Luna, just in case. Glurk reached out and laid his great hand on Zan's shoulder. But where are you going? To the old castle, Zan said. But, Glurk stared at her, there's nothing there, just a few old stones. I know, Zan said. I just need to stand there. In that place, where I last saw Zosimos and Firion's mother, and the rest of them. I need to remember things, even if it makes me sad. Leaning heavily on her staff, Zan began hobbling away. I need to remember a lot of things, she muttered to herself. Everything. Right now. 10. In which a witch finds a door and a memory tube. Zan turned her back on the swamp and followed the trail up the slope toward the crater where the volcano had opened its face to the sky so long ago. The trail had been fashioned with large flat rocks inlaid into the ground and fitted so close to one another that the seam between them could hardly let in a piece of paper. It had been years since Zan had walked this trail. Centuries, really. She shivered. Everything looked so different, and yet not. There had been a circle of stones in the courtyard of the castle once upon a time. They had surrounded the central older tower like sentinels, and the castle had wrapped around the whole of it like a snake eating its tail. But the tower was gone now, though Zan had no idea where, and the castle was rubble, and the stones had been toppled by the volcano, or swallowed up by the earthquake, or crumbled by fire and water and time. Now there was only one, and it was difficult to find. Tall grasses surrounded it like a thick curtain, and ivy clung to its face. Zan spent well over half a day just trying to find it, and once she did, it was a full hour of hard labor just to dislodge the lattice of persistent ivy. When she got down to the stone itself, she was disappointed. There were words carved into the flat of the stone, a simple message on each side. Zosimos himself had carved it, long ago. He had carved it for her when she was still a child. Don't forget, it said on one side of the stone. I mean it, it said on the other. Don't forget what? You mean what, Zosimos? She wasn't sure. Despite the spottiness of her memories, one thing she did remember was his tendency toward the obscure, and his assumption that because vague words and insinuations were clear enough for him, they must be perfectly comprehensible to all. And after all these years, Zan remembered how annoying she found it then. Confound that man, she said. She approached the stone and leaned her forehead against the deeply carved words, as if the stone might be Zosimos himself. Oh, Zosimos, she said, feeling a surge of emotion that she hadn't felt in nearly 5 centuries. I'm sorry, I've forgotten. I didn't mean to, but... The surge of magic hit her like a falling boulder, knocking her backward. She landed with a thud on her creaking hips. She stared at the stone, open-mouthed. The stone isn't magicked, she thought to herself. Of course. And she looked up at the stone just as a seam appeared down the middle, and the 2 sides swung inward, like great stone doors. Not like stone doors, Zan thought. They are stone doors. The shape of the stone still stood like a doorway against the blue sky, but the entrance itself opened into a very dim corridor where a set of stone steps disappeared into the dark. And in a flash, Zan remembered that day. She was 13 years old and terribly impressed with her own witchy cleverness, and her teacher, once so strong and powerful, was